Hello, hello. Welcome to the newest episode of Wednesday Forever on the Rogue Matter Podcast Network. I'm Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics. Along with me, of course, is Mike Dolce, the coolest guy in all of podcasting.
I am. I don't know how I earned that moniker, but
listen.
Now I got to keep it.
Like, lean into it. It's so important. Today we're talking about like a crazy great series, one that I remember when it first came out. It kind of shocked me because I didn't know what to expect. But it took me in a path, and it has stood the test of time as one of the great stories that, you know, if you're a true comic book creator and a fan of creators, this is one that matters to you. It's Spider-Man Reign, and we have the author and artist with us, Kaare Andrews. Hello.
Hey, you passed the name test. That's
yes, that's
very
important.
impressive. Very impressive.
Yes. No, the Kaare. You're not the first person I know to use Kaare like Atari. So
yeah. Well,
I
Kaare
totally
stole
well,
that
how else
from
would
me.
you say it? Carrie?
The other Kaare stole it from me.
I know he did.
Do you get the carry? Is that what it is? A lot of people say that.
I get Carrie, Kaare, Corey.
Kaare is pretty good. I give you credit for
I
that
think you
one.
should use that.
Yeah, my
I
art
don't know
teacher
why you're
was
not.
like,
Oh,
Kaare.
yeah.
I was
Hello,
like, yes.
Kaare.
It's a win all around.
Yeah.
Right. I am the Kaare. Okay, so we want to talk to you about Spider-Man Reign, and it's not just like a director's, cut kind of commentary on the book itself, but like some of the things that are the inspirations behind you wanting to tell this story. How did this story even come about? And of course, obviously for me, the first question I have is the comparisons to The Dark Knight Returns. Were they ever really a factor, or is that just a happenstance of this story's presentation?
Victor, come on. There's a character called Miller Jansen.
I mean, no, you're right.
So we had to figure out Spider-Man Reign. We have to rewind back to when I first broke into comics, into Marvel, and I broke in as someone who wanted to write and draw immediately. But I broke in as a penciler only. Broke in as a penciler first, and I could ink my own stuff. I could color my own stuff. I don't know how much I had written, but I had always been writing as a kid. So I just wanted to do these things, and it was pretty easy for me to trick people into letting me ink and color, because I could, back then you would have to FedEx penciled pages off to an inker, and then you would have to FedEx them back to Marvel, and then Marvel would FedEx them to the colorist. So it would take like a week of just travel just to do a cover. So I started doing a couple covers, and I became known as, because they were in a bar, and they're like, hey, listen, I can save us time here. I can ink this myself. And they're like, oh, okay. And then it's like, hey, listen, I could save us time here. I can color this myself. Maybe just this once. And then, you do a good job. And then the editors are like, wow, we just saved a week of travel. Like,
wow.
When we're in a bind, let's
get
Kaare
him to do it. Yeah.
To do the cover. And so I kind of like, and those covers were well received. And then, I was drawing some interior stuff, and I told my editor, Axel Alonso, at the time, I was like, hey, Axel, I want to write. And he was like, well, a lot of artists want to write. It's actually a lot harder than you would think, and we can talk about it at some time, and we can see if there's something we can maybe, let's keep talking. Basically, is what he said. So I just went and just wrote a single issue. He had Spider-Man Tangled Web at the time, and he's like, well, maybe I've got this Tangled Web book. Maybe we can find something. I'm not sure. And I just wrote an issue, laid it out so he could read it as a comic book.
Okay.
Because that's my advantage as an artist. I can just do a visual script. And he was like, wow, this is great. Let's go. And so
when you say you laid it out, did you lay out dialogue too on top of it?
Yeah, I basically made a mini comic book. I drew layouts, like rough drawings, but then I lettered it like a comic book.
Nice.
So you could just read it like a comic book.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
I mean, that's a better sales tactic than that. Like,
well, that's,
yeah.
It's so funny you say that, because that's, we talked to Tim Seeley, and we were talking about that. And originally he says, yeah, I used to do that because he was a writer artist as well too. So, but then I ran out of time. Now I just write.
Right.
Yeah, it does take more time. And it is, well, here's the trick though. Here's the trick is that, and this is why I would keep doing it, was I was worried. I was always worried about getting rewritten by my editor or asking for too many changes. And what I found by accident was that if you give them a lettered layout like comic book, the brain doesn't look at it like something to be rewritten. The brain looks at it as like,
this is
a
what
finished
it
product.
is.
I like it.
Right.
You know, it's a real life hack to like
Wow.
avoid.
All right.
Like I've
Wait,
heard
hold on, let me write that
horrible
down.
stories about. Yeah, I've heard horrible stories about like writers getting like noted to death, and especially in the film world, which I'm also a part of. Like that's just part of the landscape.
Right.
And it does happen in comics sometimes, but the life hack really is to like, even if you don't draw those layouts yourself, like get your artist to draw the layouts and then hand in a lettered layout and be like, here we go. It's just like their brain it's already like comic book. They can't note it.
Nice. I like that. What's interesting to me is my first, taste of your work was in the Spider-Man manga series. So
Yeah.
like it was super refreshing, super fun, super energetic. So for you to transition into this other Spider-Man story, it seemed like I thought you were going to be the next Spider-Man guy, like just simply Spider-Man. Was that a goal or was that kind of a happenstance?
Well, Spider-Man's always been my favorite character. Like
Okay.
he's always been my favorite character. So, I'm always interested in Spider-Man, always working on Spider-Man, but he's not my, I didn't necessarily have like, at the time, I wasn't trying to be like the next Spider-Man guy or the next Batman guy. I just, I was more interested in being the next writer artist.
Okay.
Because at the time, and even today, maybe a little less so today, but at the time, the writer artists had vanished. They weren't around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was a kid, those writer artists, Frank Miller, Walt
Right.
Simonson, Will Eisner, Jim Steranko, whoever, Howard Chaykin, like I could list off so many names of like the guys I loved were the all-in-one guys. And it was a bit of a challenge again to convince people that I could do that was the challenge. But what I've learned in life is like when you ask people something, they have to say no because it would be very awkward for them to say yes and then say, this isn't working out. So everyone just automatically says no. But if you just do something and present it to people, if you can figure that out, like inking your own cover or coloring your own cover or writing your own script.
It's already done. So you're not asking for permission.
Yeah, you're just asking to be seen. And if it's good, then they will receive it well. That's the trick. And then it's all about, and then you're not convincing people to give you the opportunity. It's just all about like, can you do the work?
Right. I like that.
So from there, after I did that one issue for Axel, we talked about wanting to do something. He's like, well, pitch me something. And I wanted to do a Spider-Man project because he's my favorite character. And, at the time, every Spider-Man story had been done except for Spider-Man in the future. I mean, there was a Spider-Man in 2099.
Right.
Like an alternative character called Spider-Man in the future, but there wasn't like a old man Spider-Man story. And I thought, oh, well, there's a hole that I can fill.
Mm-hmm.
And why that relates to the Dark Knight was, I guess it's always one of my favorite books. And it wasn't an intentional for me as a creator, an intentional like, hey, I want to do Dark Knight, but Spider-Man. But that's what sold the book to Marvel.
Really?
Was like just that log line, Dark Knight for Spider-Man, was for them the key to like, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
But I didn't really approach it that way. But that was the like, so I can't escape the comparison. And I tried to address it by naming characters after those creators and I'm not trying to fool anyone, but it's like there is a relationship there, but I tried hard not to make it a tracing of the Dark Knight. I tried to make it its own thing. It just definitely the sales team was all in on the Dark Knight angle.
Well, what's nice about that, right, is you get to kind of have something that can stand alone. It's not an alternate reality story by any means. It's more of, this is one possible ending to Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. So it's like I reread it, leading up to our podcast. The last time I read it, I think was maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago when it first came out. And I keep sitting there going, that's what makes Dark Knight Returns very powerful, is that you could read it in 1986, you could read it in 2006, you could read it in 2026, and it crosses those boundaries. So by doing it in that way, you almost have something that can always be picked up. I mean, was that something you thought about as you're going?
Well, that was another accidental lesson. Like at the time, it was like, and even today, again, when I was a kid, the big events were like Dark Knight, or like, I don't know what they were, like mini series. There were self-contained stories, and Secret Wars was a thing that happened, but it wasn't like the thing that happens every year.
Yeah.
But by the time I broke in, the industry had changed, and these crossovers were rampant, and the most talented guys were doing these crossovers, and they were swapping out writers and artists all throughout the crossovers. And I just looked at that model, and just selfishly as a creator, I'm like, well, how do you create something important if you're chapter 3 in a 9 chapters book, and you're just lifting, you're lifting the load from block A to block C,
right?
There's the whole alphabet. Like, how do you own that? How do you be Frank Miller if you're drawing chapter 3 in Secret Wars 5? Like, you can't make Dark Knight in Secret Wars 5,
right?
Chapter C of Secret Wars 5. So selfishly as a creator, I wanted to stay out of continuity. And what I learned from that experience was that there's great power in staying out of continuity. There's a cost, because the most popular books at the time were all, and even now, there are these crossovers. And in the hierarchy of like popularity, like momentary, immediate popularity, like where do I rank in the top 10 artists, the wizard list? I'm not that that's there anymore, but it was when I broke in, right? It's like, how do I get on that wizard top 10 list? Well, maybe I draw chapter 5 of Secret Wars 10, and it's like, and then I get someone says I'm number 7 in the top 10 artists, and maybe I get a raise in my page rates or whatever. But it just seemed to me like such a game I was not interested in playing, especially as a writer artist. Like, or someone who wanted to be a writer artist.
Right.
There was no way to prove yourself as a writer artist by drawing chapter 3 in the 10 chapter tale with 7 other artists and 3 other writers. Like, there was just no way to do it. So the cool thing is,
that makes you part of the Dog and Pony Show, that you don't get to define your career. You have to just...
Victor, don't dismiss the crossover. For our listeners, let's throw a little context out, right? So this is like circa 2006, right? So actually, I was still at Wizard at the time when this came out. I think we had actually, when I was working in research, probably exchanged emails back and forth, because there was a Wizard top 10 list. There was a Wizard magazine. That was like
great. And for a creator, that list was very important.
Oh, it was. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, that was a big thing. And even for a fan, it was big to know, what creators do I need to be checking out? What creators, or again, just for debate purposes, how could this person be on and not this person? It was interesting how they used to go about doing it. Within the Wizard offices, there was always a genuine. It was never commercial. It was never for shock value. I mean, they generally, these debates that fans would have are what the editorial staff would have in terms of who goes into that list. And some of it, was business driven. Like, this guy moves the needle versus that artist who doesn't move the needle. That factors in. But that factors in, I think, no matter what. 2006, though, I mean, you're looking at a time when Civil War. I think Civil War was the big one for.
I think so.
It hadn't come out yet.
But with Avengers Disassembled, and we talk about this.
Blur to me.
Yeah, we talk about this on the Rogue Wave podcast. I don't think people can understand a time period when Avengers was not the biggest thing on the planet, right?
That is true.
And it was right around this time, and maybe give or take a year or two, where Marvel stopped investing. Well, actually, no, they didn't even stop investing in X-Men. X-Men was still big, but they started really paying attention to these Avengers characters who, quite frankly, for 90s readers like myself and Victor and you as well, too, they were kind of lame, right? I mean, like the X-Men were the big thing in the 90s. Say
it right. They were D-level. Let's be honest.
They were, right?
Yeah.
So Marvel started investing into their major characters again, and they did it by creating these events. And DC had Identity Crisis right around that same time. So it was these event-driven, series. So Victor, yes, you're right. It is a Dog and Pony Show. It was definitely one of those things. But I think for the state of the industry, what it actually ended up doing was establishing all these characters that today are making billions of dollars at the box office. And
also for a company, I mean, it's a good move, because when you have an event title, you have 10 core issues. Every issue spins off into every other title. For completist, you're not just selling a 4-issue miniseries, you're actually selling 40 comic books.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's like sales just bump up. And this was like when I broke in, Marvel had just filed for bankruptcy protection.
Yep.
Like people forget that too, that Marvel was like almost out of business when I broke in. When I broke in,
I took off the slips cover piece that you did for this book, but this is one of my Bibles talking about that time period.
Yeah.
And you did the cover for it. So
yeah.
Sorry, but slow plug.
Here's another interesting thing. Like that time period when Marvel was going under, it really was going under. Just before I broke in, every editor I'd meet would be like, "Why your stuff is great. You shouldn't be doing comic books. There will not be comic books in 5 years.
Your comic book work is great. Don't do comics.
Don't do
animation."
this.
No, these were the editors. These were Marvel editors, DC editors. But I never got into comic books because I thought that was the road to riches or the road to fame or like,
right.
You know, I just love the medium. And in a way, like I miss that time period when there was a real cost to being a comic book fan. Like your friends would kind of like look at you funny or
what, you like comics?
Yeah, you know, like I think that time period when comic books were devalued by society in general was the peak creative work. Like that time period when people are trying to prove to the rest of the world that this was a viable medium with viable stories and amazing artwork. Like I miss that so much.
I agree with you.
You know, and I think part of the problem today is these movies they got so popular. Everyone gets so excited when they find out I draw Marvel comic books, like with the bank teller or Starbucks or whatever.
Right.
Like, but I think it's had an adverse reaction to the comic books themselves. Like if you Google Captain America, what comes up? Pages of Chris Evans. Like,
right.
What? Like that, you know,
not a single Jack Kirby image, you know, in the first 3 pages. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, man. It's hijacked the medium. I can't wait. And I'm saying this as someone who also directs film and TV. Like, I can't wait for the comic book movie craze to die down again, because I think that will bring back my feelings. That will bring back the books themselves. You know, because right now those movies are just like saturating. Especially
I don't think it's going to die down though. I just don't think.
I mean, not to throw in, but until theaters open back up, I think we're seeing it. Like
but now everything's streaming. It's just a different delivery system. But every new series now is based off.
I don't know, man. These movies, man, they invested too much. I don't think they can go for the streaming.
I think it'll take a few years, but I think there is a bit of fatigue right now, growing. But it'll take another few years, and then the movies will come back again, right?
Right.
And then it'll be fun.
It's all cyclical.
I'm waiting for that surge in like. I'm waiting for that. Like I'm waiting for the public response when I go to Starbucks and be like, "Oh, you draw Marvel comics." Yeah, just not into those movies anymore. I'm waiting for that, because then the creators will be like, "Listen, man, let me show you
some work,
real stuff." You know,
that's awesome.
It's really funny you mentioned that though. I was thinking about that the other day too, and I've said this. Victor and I have had conversations at many Comic Cons. You know, we're sitting behind our tables and we're peddling our wares, and I just look around, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, but the amount of normal people that are there, and I only say that because, you know, again, I worked at Wizard early in 2000, and that's when I broke in around 2002, 2003, and you know, I would be at my con and I'd be at my table and I'd be doing, you know, and you know, there was a familiarity to the type of people that you would see, and it was, you know, the quote unquote the nerd, the geek, the, you know, the fanboy, you know, forget girls. There were no girls at cons. You know, I think my life would be completely different if I started conning, you know, 10 years ago as opposed to 20 years ago. But it was this type of goer. And then as the years progressed and as the movies became more popular, I mean, usually, again, you wouldn't see a girl at a convention. You would see a girl being dragged by her boyfriend, you know, at a convention.
If he was lucky enough to have a girlfriend.
That was right. That was the quote unquote, you know, the stereotypical profile. And that has so changed now to a point where, I mean, obviously within the industry now, I think there's fanboys coming to grips with the fact that their secret's out now. And there's something that you want to hold on to almost in a way to this thing that gave you comfort that now everyone is. It's a weird.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's like when you root for a band to become successful, then they sell millions of records, and you're like, oh, they're such a sellout.
They're sellouts now. We don't love them. We don't love them like we used to.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. That's my thought on it. We will talk about Spider-Man Reign at some point here too. But
Oh yeah. So to continue my story here. So what I did was like, hey, let's do this, and then immediately Axel was like, yes. And then you know what? I always have this weird thing that happens was when Axel said yes, we want to do it, and this was just a paragraph pitch or maybe a one-page pitch. It was very short, no artwork. It took me. I think I was a bit. There was a bit of a delay before I actually did it. I can't remember why. I think I was drawing another project or something before when I actually got the pitch approved and when I actually drew it. There was some kind of delay, and I was trying to figure. Part of my problem is I draw in different styles.
Yeah.
I've never played it smart where like, here's the one way I draw, and you'll always know it's me because this is the one way I draw, and it's my signature style, which is a great way to do it. Very smart way to do it. Like if you're Ferrari, you're only selling Ferraris.
Right.
But I get so bored, and I just like art so much. I just want to draw all kinds of ways. And I try to keep it where the project is consistent, but the different projects, I allow myself to change style or try new things is more how I put it. So I was like having the hardest time figuring out even just how to draw this book. Because originally I was going to be like, I had this real inclination to do like completely computer generated a book, which I didn't know how to do, but I was like teaching myself ZBrush and Maya. And like, I was just untrained, just trying to figure it out.
But that's really rogue. I mean, that's exactly how you're supposed to do it. Right. I mean, you're an artist. You're not.
Yeah. Well, at the time I was one of the only artists in comics that was painting computer covers. Right. Like it was a new thing, and no one else was doing it, or a few people were doing it. It was me, Greg Horn, I don't know who else. There's like a couple of guys. It was a brand new thing, and now everyone paints on the computer these covers.
Right.
And in response, I've gone back and now I'm airbrushing on paper with paints and pencil crayons and kind of like an old school style. Just I'm always like trying to do the opposite of what I think.
Ditching the crowd, man.
The herd.
Victor was just showing before we went live. You know, he's working on his iPad Pro. I mean, it's and Gary Larson, funny enough, I mean, from the Far Side, has now returned thanks to technology. He credits the fact that he's like, wow, I never knew. This finally caught up to the way I want to draw, and I can use this. And now all of a sudden, I'm inspired to draw again. Like it was really funny. So he actually came back to making cartoons again because of that. So it's
fantastic.
Funny. It's funny to hear that. When Spider-Man Reign came out too, and this is again, I never looked at Spider-Man Reign as I looked at it as an homage to Dark Knight Returns, but I always looked at it as its own thing, right? I never looked at it as like he's trying to do Dark Knight Returns. I looked at it more as, okay, he wanted to take elements of Dark Knight Returns in tone and in style and kind of bring it into a Spider-Man universe. That's the way I looked at it. And what Dark Knight Returns does, and that you did as well too, is you actually captured the fear and the feeling of living in terrorism at the time. And again, this is almost 15 years ago. We have completely different political problems. We have completely different political conversations. But back then it was, how much liberty do you give up in the name of protection? And so talk to me about that, and talk to us about, that message, which
well, that was 9/11 was a big deal.
Right.
And that was the Patriot Act, when it was a big, that was a big problem. And it was like, it's just weird. I live in Canada. I don't live in the States. So when you live in Canada, you kind of like have a clear view of your neighbors, but you're not in that neighborhood. So it's weird where I think, I feel like Canadians can be a bit more objective about what's going on in the States sometimes, because
third party can always do that.
Yeah. But we're so affected by American culture. Like we basically live in American culture, but not in America. It's like, that's how it works. And so I was watching in the States, this real urge to give away personal freedom for protection. That was the thing, and everyone was like all in. And as a bit of a contrarian, I just found that fascinating. I thought, well, what is that? And like, it wasn't purposeful, but it didn't. It did affect the story that I was telling, and that this web system of like protecting yourself from the outside world was this web system, but in reality, it's a cage that you live in, right? And it's like I don't know. It definitely was something that I was playing around with. I don't know how else to say it. I was playing with. I didn't have an agenda or an ideology that I was trying to like preach or lecture, but it was something that was fascinating to watch.
It set the backdrop. I mean, it set the backdrop for everything, but at the same time, it's always funny rereading or rewatching films and to see if they're relevant or not, right? I remember rewatching PCU with Jeremy Piven.
Jeremy Piven.
But I remember rewatching
PCU.
it like 10 years ago and being like, this is so out of date. And then I never watched it again like last year. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Totally relevant again.
Right back.
It's interesting. This is a snapshot of that time to me. But it's still, there's enough fear of, giving up your personal liberties maybe in different ways now than it was back then, because, obviously you said 9/11, but it's still relevant. It still resonates.
It's so funny that you say that, because when I reread it, I had the immediate correlation of the, Black Lives Matter movement, not necessarily the organization, but the instance of police brutality and the citizens' response to it. So that, to me, I was like, this is the now. Like, this is one of those stories that will forever and always live, because there's always going to be something that people can relate to in some aspect of it. So I think it's
I can totally see what you're talking about there when I think about the book.
I didn't think about it but now you just said it.
It's like, I mean, it's one of those forest for the trees kind of things where, obviously you being in New York even will definitely draw out the 9/11 factor. You being a Black guy, I'm definitely going to see the police brutality factor. So it becomes something that is so universal, because it speaks to different people in different ways, at different volumes. I love New York. I visit there every year, but I wouldn't have the same, 9/11 reaction, because I'm not from there. I don't live there. But, yes, I recognize it, but still, once you have that thing that it relates to you about, huge.
But I think the best thing that it allows to do when you do a book like this, that's out of continuity, a bit in the future, a bit of a recontextual setting for this character, is it really allows you, it's an easy way to allow you to reevaluate the core of the character, because you're always thinking, what can I do with Spider-Man next? And if you're just going in current continuity, it's like, well, let's try this, and let's try that, and let's try this. And now he's married, now he's got a clone, now he's got a kid, now he's, all that stuff that is the weird stuff, and it's that through line that connects them all. But if you can go out of time, well, now I can just go back to the core of the character. And so I was very focused on like, what is the core of the character? Obviously, with great power comes great responsibility. And I had this was the idea I was focused on. If I put him in a situation where Mary Jane was dead, and maybe it was even his fault in some way, if you can't save the woman you love, maybe you have no power. And if you have no power, maybe you have no responsibility. For me, that was the core. And that's always the one thing I was trying to think of and chase out, was like this idea of like, no matter how strong you are, no matter how many powers you are, like what are you responsible for if you can't save the one you love, which is especially as a man, your task is to protect your family, protect your wife, protect your kids if you have them. like this is not even a social construct. It's like, it's biological. Like we have millions of years of as a man, only speaking as a man, because I've never lived another life, but like your task is to protect people around you. And I remember as a kid, like even as a teenager, I was always thought like, oh, the best way to go out would be to like, interrupt some kidnapping or hijacking and just go down in a hail of bullets, but save everyone around you.
I saved everybody.
Yeah, like
I think that's absolutely true though. It's funny you say that, because I mean, there's so many times where you're like, well, that's a good death. I can there's nothing better than not that you want to die that way, but
Well, it's also the call to war, the call to valor, and so if you take away that from a guy, I don't know. I was interested in this. I was only like in my 20s, but I was interested in that idea of like an older man who just that to me was the definition of failure, especially if you're a superhero with superpowers and you're supposed to be doing things better than anyone else. So like for me, that was the most interesting thing. And I think that's why the story, like I still see news stories on Spider-Man Reign like every couple months for How long has it been now? Like,
it's fantastic. 2006, I believe, is when it first came out. December of 2006. So
and, you know,
14 years.
Yeah, a lot of the stories are like, we can talk about this too. I don't know about now or later, but a lot of the stories is this controversial thing of like, oh, is like I don't know how
no, keep it 100, whatever.
Do whatever you want to do.
Like,
I don't even know what that means, what he just said, but you can say whatever you want.
The the whole spider fluid.
Oh,
yeah, that's one of my favorite parts. I was listen. So when this came out, I was a new father. At that time in 2006, my youngest son had just been born, so I had two sons, and the notion of Peter not understanding the full context of the toxicity of himself is such a Peter Parker thing to experience. You know what I mean? Like Spider-Man is the most guilt-ridden, neurotic character of all time, and that was like the perfect explanation of how he would regress to pre-Spider-Man Peter Parker, to still be Peter more than he ever was Spider-Man. In that moment of ultimately saying, like, I was responsible because I kept exposing her through my love, even. Like, I was like, yo, that is huge. And at the time, I think I was coming off of Spider-Man Blue as well. So any work that was really pushing that emotional context of Peter's failings, I was in love with. And that moment, like that phrase, was like, oh my God, his fluids would be irradiated. Oh my God, like that hurts because he just never thought of it.
Right. Well, you know, here's what's funny though is I get accused a lot of like you know, giving Peter Parker radioactive spider jizz, and that's what Mary Jane got killed by the radioactive spider jizz. And it's like I'm not saying that is not part of the case, but I was also talking about just his blood, like how it actually, the inspiration for that was actually like, he's got radioactive blood. Like to me, that was like radioactive blood. Like what? Like that's a problem. That's a problem. And so for me, I was like, felt like, oh, okay. Blood, spit, sweat, saliva, every fluid, just being around someone in an intimate setting, holding them close at night, romance, anything like that's like it's like to me that was so interesting that when I started to like think like that's how you would expose someone you love, but just by physically loving them would be the thing that killed it. Was so horrible.
I always question whether or not it was true, though. Like, is that not also a factor of Peter's neuroses, that he's taking responsibility for it, and it had nothing to do with him? Like, that was always one of the things that I love, the ambiguity of it, is it was a suggestion that that's what happened, but it's no confirmation. So
how could you? Right. He'd have to give up his identity to do it.
Right. And he's literally taking this literal responsibility onto himself, and it might not even be true, but that's just how he feels.
But I think that was part of the things that has made the story infamous. Well, there's also the Peter strong nudity. Reactions of like people who like it's the only book I've written, and this happened 2 times, where I've had young guys come up to me and be like, I was in a suicidal spot and this book saved my life. Wow. Like, what? Did that happen twice? And it was just like, oh my God, like that is the craziest thing. And I could ever
elaborate how and like, I mean, what was the emotional connection?
Sorry, I'm in depression. I mean, this was in line at conventions. This was not in a.
Oh, I got you.
Like a 2 or 3 minute conversation, and as I'm signing books.
That's gotta be surreal. That's a surreal feeling, right? I mean, you're sitting there. I mean, these guys are essentially saying, "Hey, like you saved my life," and you're like, "Do you want me to sign it or not?"
Right? Like, yeah.
Whether or not that's actually true, to hear that lets you withstand any of the battering that you may take, because in any book that kind of survives, it's because there's like one side that just is opposed to it and just is trying to beat you up, and one group that loves it and is trying to like raise you up. So it's like, so you feel weirdly like
you're girded,
pressed in by these two opposing forces, but it's good. It's good. Like you want that reaction, but it's actually pretty stressful to go through. Like, I don't know. It's a weird situation.
Indeed.
So it's funny. You know, one of the things I thought you did really well in this too as a longtime Spider-Man reader, was you brought in the villains, but you actually stayed true pretty much to all the villain personalities for the most part. And the character that I always loved, and I hated when creators would then go make him a bad guy again, was Sandman, because Sandman had a whole arc, in the 90s and early 2000s where he actually was an Avenger at one point.
Right.
And he had redemption in him. And so for me to see him at the end of this, recognize his daughter, and his daughter's there, and I thought that was pretty cool. But to see, where I sit there and go, okay, good. He recognizes. I know it's out of continuity, but it is working off of, at least it's not in its own. It's not in a vacuum. You're not working in a vacuum.
Right.
It's be very reflective of that with Sandman.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, I was trying to examine the different the nature of masks and heroes, and what that means, and I don't know, again, just trying to play with different elements, and just trying to not with really, I think it's a mistake when art turns into agenda. Like, I think the difference between the first Matrix movie and the sequels was the first Matrix movie was like, here's some amazing ideas, boom, what, whoa, and then Matrix 2 and 3 were like, let me explain these ideas in detail and tell you how to feel about them. And then it was just like, oh, really?
Don't love that.
No, these are all amazing movies. Even 2 and 3 are amazing filmmaking, but the difference is, like, I love ideas, but I hate lectures. Like, I can't. And I'm always trying. I try
That's
real hard. That's
a controversial statement nowadays, though. I mean, it really is actually that to say that, because I think we're seeing this in news, we're seeing this in just discussions. It's someone once said, now thanks to social media, you have to bring the correct answer to the table. There's no discussion. You just bring. You have to bring the correct answer.
Got to be the yes or no.
Whatever tribe you belong to, it needs to be the correct answer.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest horror of today.
Yeah.
Is that if you don't have the right morals, the right ideas, someone's going to try to take you out, no matter what side you're on. And art survives beyond the morality or ideology or politics of today.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, real art just is about humanity and human experience and ideas. And then, like, we can assign Black Lives Matter to Spider-Man Reign, or we can assign 9/11 to Spider-Man Reign, or we can assign a fatherhood to Spider-Man Reign. It's like, I like art that just is like idea, exploration, but no agenda. And I think the mistake, and I've even made it, to be honest, in my work, is trying to imbue, not even trying, just allowing your ideology to become a lecture in the work, as opposed to just like when you play with things.
Correct.
Then you're engaging people.
Right.
And when you're lecturing people, you're not engaging, you're just pointing finger at someone. And either you're like, you're with me on the good side, or you're a bad person. Like, I hate that so much.
That used to be what supervillains would say.
Right.
Right. Oh my gosh.
No, that's absolutely true.
We would
Magneto was the worst of them, right?
Right. And it just happened to be whatever the societal side was at the time. I mean, it definitely, I agree with you 100%. There's a saying that I love, is that I want to buy, I do not want to be sold to. I love being, I want to buy, you have a message of positivity, you have a message of this. Great. I want to buy it. Don't sell me on it, and it was something, even in college, if someone tried to write, I used to call it pamphlet material. I'm like, I want to read a story. I don't want to read pamphlets. I don't want to read that kind of stuff.
This is why this is, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think Spider-Man Reign does a great job of doing that. It's just having a discussion.
I have to admit, on the villain side, one of the things that Spider-Man Reign did that no other book ever could is make me care about Venom. I actually was an anti-Venom person. Because I always felt that Venom was...
There's no escaping that joke.
I know, it really wasn't. I always felt that Venom was a manufactured villain. One of those that is literally created to be the total antithesis of all the greatness of Peter. And therefore, he can't be that great because it's not organic. He was made to be that way. But this actually made Venom very humanized in the fact that Peter's role of getting the symbiote and then abandoning the symbiote symbiote itself felt a certain kind of way about that. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, this is beautiful, actually. Like, it really kind of like made the symbiote the victim of Peter, yet again, not thinking things through.
One of my favorite runs of Spider-Man was the McFarlane, David Michelinie run, in particular.
Yep.
And when Venom was first created, he was that kind of a character in many ways. It was through Eddie Brock, but I was always struck, I think, during that run by like that's what happened. Like Peter took him from another planet. They had a bad breakup, and he abandoned him, an alien life form, alone on another planet. And I always thought that was something that hadn't been explained properly. And like, what better justification for doing horrible things than the bad breakup? I don't know. Like,
I agree.
Yeah, that was definitely a touchstone.
Have you noticed the storylines that are currently popular or have been popular that could, not saying they did, but could have been inspired by Spider-Man Reign? Obviously, we've got Donny Cates' run on Venom that has, Null and the other symbiotes coming out. It's this whole storyline that's coming later on this year where the symbiote god is going to take over, let alone Superior Spider-Man, because there's that little stint in there where Doc Ock.
Yeah, I saw that too, actually.
Yeah.
I thought that was
like, I'm going to replace you. And I'm like,
explain it to me. I missed it.
So in Superior Spider-Man, Doc Ock takes Peter's body and basically switches his consciousness with Peter.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So in the stint where Doc Ock's body shows up, guided by the arms, there's a little piece in there where he's like, I'm going to replace you. I'm going to take your body and I'm going to replace you with myself. And it was like this really interesting sort of like internal or monologue. But I was like, I wonder if that's where Dan Slott kind of took that seed and was like, let me run with this. What would happen if Doc Ock did that?
That's really funny because Dan Slott, I mean, I don't know him. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but when he was doing the Spider-Verse thing, it seemed like he had a bit of a problem with Spider-Man Reign. The way he integrated that character was a bit like
little ho-hum.
Weird, a bit of a weird. Like it's not something, it felt weird. It felt a little bit weird.
I got you. A little
behind the scenes here. That's
right.
Yeah. That's the fun part.
Basically he showed up for like 3 panels and they smashed his head in with the tombstone of the cover behind you.
Right.
Just like, I totally get it. Like as a creator, what you always want to do, you have a real urge to, and this is part of life, right? Generations. Destroy the past and create the future. Like this is the cycle of like what's going on now, of like Spider-Man. Anytime you're in a book, like I did it a little bit with Iron Fist. It's like you kind of want to blow up some of the things that have already worked with that character to make room for some of the new ideas that you want to do. And it's creative enterprise. So it's like this is part of creating. But the funny thing is, like, one thing I had never seen when I did my Spider-Man Reign was this acknowledgement of the Venom world seemed to be forgotten, that maybe there was a world of these things, and like opening up a portal to allow that world into ours seemed to me like that's a thing. I haven't seen that before.
Right.
And then after I did that, I saw that kind of idea starting to happen. But the cool thing about doing comic books is, like, I didn't create Spider-Man, I didn't create Sandman, I didn't create the Hypno Hustler. Like, these are just characters that you are there. And the idea of with great power comes responsibility. I didn't do that. Like, I didn't do any of this. I didn't do Dark Knight. I didn't do any of this stuff. But it was my turn to play with those toys and do my thing. And what you really want to do is have your stint travel forward. And you want your stint to be something that does stick in someone's mind and play with, whether that happens or not. Like, that's, to me, that's always been the goal of when you work on these legacy characters, is like you want to like take your turn at bat and hit that ball so hard, like people will remember that one swing 20 years ago. Like, that's what you wanted. That's the goal. That's all you can do, right? That's the goal.
It's like you stole my last question, which was going to be, what do you want to see, in closing? Like, I mean, what is your final stamp on this book? What is your final analysis, your final grade? What do you hope its legacy is?
I don't know. I find it so interesting it's still getting talked about. I think here's what I think part of the reason. Well, there's a few different reasons. One is there aren't many self-contained Spider-Man stories.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Like, this is a flagship character. There are how many self-contained Batman characters?
Yeah.
This is the character that's been reinvestigated in self-contained stories for millennia. Spider-Man should be doing that with Spider-Man. They should be doing little, Spider-Man by Gaslight, like Gotham by Gaslight, whatever. Like there should be these self-contained stints. And I think the reason that this is one of the few that has ever been done helps its survival, not just the in continuity issues 389 to 394 or whatever, a self-contained story. And then I do think that it's one of the few stories that does reinvestigate the core of the character. And often, again, when you're in a continuity telling issue to issue for decades, it's hard to figure out how to do that again and again and again. But if you have your own story, it's easy to reinvestigate. 3, I do think that this idea of like the controversy of the Spider-Man sperm killed Mary Jane is an important part of the book. And I think it's important in a way that I don't think people are aware of. Like, I think it's important in the fact that if this was a different character in that situation, probably would be forgotten. But because for many people, Spider-Man represents youth, a young man, and many people a teenager still, they think of him as a teenage character, that the idea of Spider-Man having sex is too much. It's just too much. But this is like, he's an old man who's been married. Like, of course he's had sex. Like, of course he has. But that idea is like, you
gorgeous
can't have...
too. Like, come on.
Eric Larson was the only one to touch on that, and he did it in a fill-in issue when McFarlane had left to go to Image.
A terrible pun that you just did right there.
Oh, I did.
So terrible. Oh,
I do that. Well, I did.
But I think there is a like, comic books has always been, since I've been reading them, kind of a youth medium. And there was such a desire when I was reading comic books. The creators were like, we're going to prove that this is an adult medium too. No one will listen, but it is. And we're going to do it. And like, congratulations, kids don't read comic books anymore. Like, that was but
you did it.
The funny thing that happened is that the readers of these characters, part of that process was a lot of us readers, like, look at the art behind me. I'm this way too, but haven't quite matured ourselves as grown-ups.
Sure.
So even when we're older readers, sometimes it can be a little tricky to be like, Spider-Man having sex? What? I had this problem with, I did a cover with for X-Men Xenogenesis where I had Emma Frost sitting on top of Cyclops' back eating pancakes. Weird little cover. I don't know where it came from. Just like a fun. They were in a relationship at the time.
Sure.
And, Emma's this kind of like, she mind controls people through dominatrix, basically. So I thought it was a funny, totally, like, there was I guess a bit of sexual innuendo, but these are clothed characters. She's eating pancakes, that's smiling, and I had the weirdest response from that cover. I had this weirdest response of like, people just couldn't handle it.
Wow.
And again, I think there's this weird dynamic of like these legacy heroes, childhood heroes. I think it shocks people when you make them
grown-ups.
When you make them
or just you put them in a context that they're not used to seeing them in.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah. I think that's all for Spider-Man Reign. That's part of what had happened. And also number 4 is I do think the story is about a character that's in a real dark place and finds his way out. And I think that's always for me anyways, those are the stories I relate to. Like, life is hard. Like, life is hard. You fall down hard. You hurt everyone around you love all the time. You only hurt the people the most that you care about the most. And if you're in a marriage, you know that you have hurt that person. And if you can survive it, it makes the marriage stronger.
Of course.
But it's unavoidable. Like, it's just, we are humans that do human things to each other. And, we need mechanisms. It's not even just that we need mechanisms of forgiveness, but we become stronger when we forgive. And I just like, when I look at the world today, it's just like, oh, wait, like,
that's something we've forgotten. That's a power that we have lost. We have forgotten how to say, you know what, I forgive you.
Like when someone does something horrible to you, it's only because you probably are connected with them in some way. And if you don't know them and they've done something horrible, I don't know, like, it's just like, maybe that's an opportunity to come together as people. Like, I get, it's a hard time to be around.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
Yeah.
It will come back. It will come back. But it's just like, I don't know. I firmly believe like you guys know this as creative people, you only reach that high point, that point where you do your best work, because you've dipped down here.
That's
and
right.
Life is horrible. Your work is horrible. Nothing's working. You don't know what to do. There's no way out. And you just have to survive this.
Push anyway. Absolutely.
And you can't live here. That's momentary. That's like a turn around the Ferris wheel. And you just got to get back up there. And you know the fall is going to come. And then when you fall, you got to hold on.
Know that there's that light at the end. You're absolutely right.
But not even light at the end. It's like there's a light at the top.
And you're gonna keep going. Hopefully you have a few more rotations. So you just gotta because once the wheels stop spinning, my friend, there's no light. Exactly. Yeah. Kaare, thank you so very much for joining us. This was a great conversation. A lot of insight to the process of this series, which is fantastic. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I don't want to speak for Mike. I'll let you.
I hated it.
Sure. Oh, you lied.
I'm just excited people are still talking about it. Selfishly as a creator, like,
that's all you can ask for.
That's all you can ask for, you know. And I don't know how long people will keep talking about it, but every few months I get another Google alert. Spider-Man Rain.
I have one weird question. Yeah. One that it's not exactly explicitly said, but the guy that's being starved, is that Kingpin?
Yes. Okay. So I didn't have room for it. I had actually had a few more pages. I always felt like if there was some kind of anniversary edition, I could finally complete that story I set up. I just ran out of pages.
Oh, wow.
But the guy that's being starved is Kingpin. And then, spoiler alerts for a 15-year-old book, once the building collapses, he escapes and is finally allowed to eat again.
Oh, wow.
And it's his captor. He's going to feast on him.
Oh, wow.
That would have been fun, but I just ran out of pages.
Awesome.
That's still good to know. Still good to know. That's amazing. Oh, my goodness. This has been Wednesday Forever on the Rogue Matter Podcast Network. I'm Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics, speaking for Mike Dolce, the coolest man in the whole podcast world.
I try.
Thank you.
And the man with the hardest name. The hardest name to pronounce in comics. Ian Bill Sienkiewicz.
Man. Bill's last name has got to be one of the, trivia questions of the comic book world. Yeah. But thank you again for joining us. This has been a true pleasure, and we'd love to have you on again, possibly talking about Iron Fist next time.
Yeah, a lot of fun. You guys are awesome. Great. It's great to be around.
Thank you. Truly appreciate that. Till next time, guys. We'll see you. This has been Wednesday Forever.